Hey everyone, this is Kyle Adams, Principal Solutions Engineer for Alfresco. In today's video, we'll explore one of Alfresco's old features called XPath Metadata Extraction. Now, this feature was used back in the 2.x days when we used to support a product called WCM AVM. Now, this feature was typically used for web content management use cases, but I think it's still applicable for lots of other use cases where we want to extract content from XML files. Before we jump into the Alfresco Share UI, let's look at our content model definition. So what I've built out here is actually an artist content type with specific properties that we'll use within the metadata extraction process. So we find things like the artist name, the record label, the origin city, the genres, which can be a multi-value property, the members, which is also a multi-value property, and the date the band was formed and the date the band disbanded. Now, this is the core piece of our use case, and we'll use this to map Alfresco metadata properties to XML nodes. Let's also take a look at this Spring context file. This Spring context file's main purpose is to define the XPath metadata extraction process. So the main bean that we want to pay attention to is this extractor.xml hipster model metadata extractor bean. Now, there are two main pieces where we'll actually map to two properties files. The hipster model mappings property file, which will actually map a content model and its associated properties to this bean, and B, how we map the content model properties to XPath expressions. So let's jump in and take a look at those one by one. So in our hipster model mapping properties file, we have things like the namespace prefix for our content model that we previously defined, and the maps for the artist name that correspond to the properties that we've defined in the content model. So we have all of our properties here that we used beforehand. And secondly, we have the hipster model XPath mappings properties. And this is used to map XML nodes to our content model properties. So here we have a starting XML node artist, and then a corresponding XML attribute called name. So let's take a look at a few of our sample files that will map to this. So I actually have this shakygraves.xml, and we see that we have a node here called artist and an attribute called shakygraves. And we have other content here for our record label, the origin, which is Austin, Texas, the genre, which is Indie Americana, and the member, which is Alejandro. Now let's transition to Alfresco Share. So I have actually prepped Share by creating a site called Discography, and in our site we have one artist folder. Now we've already set this folder up with a simple rule, so let's quickly take a look at that rule definition. So essentially this is going to evaluate whether the MIME type is of XML, and if it is, we'll specialize it to our artist type. So let's go ahead and upload a few of the examples that we previously created. So I have a few here. Let's drag and drop Unius Mavant, and let's take a look at the properties. So we have the artist name. The label that he's a part of is called Record Records. He is from Reykjavik, Iceland, and the band member is a really unpronounceable Icelandic name. And we can upload that Shaky Graves example that we looked at before. So we have things like the artist name. He's actually independent right now, and he's from Austin, Texas. The genre is Indie Americana, and the member is Alejandro. And let's take a look at the rest of the example. So I'm going to select multiple. So we've got Braid, Broncho, Strand of Oaks, The Rapture, and Vacationer. And let's take a look at one of my favorite bands, Braids. I know this one has multiple members, so we'll actually see how we're extracting multiple band members and applying it to a multi-value text field. So what we've seen is actually a pretty simple configuration to do something extremely powerful. So we've taken XML content and we've mapped it to metadata properties inside of Alfresco. Now, since we've extracted all this metadata, we can now use this to drive business processes, to drive workflow, to drive search, and so on.